Hi, everybody. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon for our 1 o'clock AMHSI Israel Education Online, a joint venture between Jewish National Fund and Alexander Muss High School in Israel, where we come together each and every day and learn different topics from our amazing, wonderful Muss educators. Today, we're pleased to welcome back to our online learning Jacob Leibowitz, one of our Israel educators. He grew up in the German colony in Jerusalem after his family made Aliyah from New York at 5 years old. He fell in love with the world of education as a teenager while working at a sports camp in Jerusalem. Since then, he spent multiple summers working as a camp counselor in the United States and also 3 years as a girls basketball coach in Israel. He first started working with Muss as a madrich immediately after his release from the IDF in 2013, and he always knew that he wanted to come back as a teacher. He is a licensed tour guide through the Beit Berel College, and where he's completed his degree in education. He believes in teaching young students how to ask questions and think with the hope of inspiring students to explore their Jewish identity and strengthen their connection with Israel, which we know not just that he believes in, but we know that Jacob actually does because he's inspired, indeed, so many of our students. So Jacob, it is a pleasure to have you with us today to teach. The classroom is yours.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you. This time you got the completed education degree right. So now hey everyone, good to see everybody. For those of you who didn't join the last class, I'm Jacob. Most of you, if not all of you, know me. And I want to get started. I want to encourage everyone who's here to feel free to use the chat to write any questions you want or thoughts or anything like that. It's going to be hard to get everybody speaking at the same time, so we're going to try and keep people generally muted until the end. And if you have questions throughout, I'm going to be keeping my eye on the chat, and I can answer questions throughout. Don't be shy, go ahead. You can also write privately to me so that I can see it and I can sort of choose whether to answer it at that moment or not. And I think that's how we'll handle the classroom itself. In terms of what I am here today to talk about, I chose a not so controversial at all topic to speak about, our current Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, or as he is known, Bibi. And I'd actually like to start by explaining why I chose this topic. A few weeks ago, Greg spoke with me after my first class and said, you know, it was great, I want you to pick something else, something new, something different. Pick a topic that interests you and let's see if we can get it going. So I spent a few days thinking about it, and because Israel at the moment seems like we finally might have a government, this seemed like a pretty good topic to choose. But why Bibi? So the truth is that Bibi has been around my entire life. When I was 6 years old, about a year after my family made Aliyah, I remember walking through the streets of Jerusalem and seeing the picture of the youngest then to-be prime minister in Israel's history. This is 1996. And I remember asking my parents, does this young guy have a chance to win? The answer was no. He was a complete underdog in 1996. That might sound funny for people today because he is known as the big winner. He is the longest serving prime minister Israel has ever had. So how did we go from that guy who when I was 6 years old seemed like he had no chance to win to a guy who now it seems like he has no chance to lose? The truth is he wins in 1996. He sticks around for a couple of years, but then he disappears. He disappears in 1999 and only comes back in 2009, 10 years later as prime minister. He will be involved in Israeli politics throughout those years, but he makes a number of mistakes that keep him from becoming our prime minister again. And I'm talking a little bit about those mistakes and what he learned from that. But since the year 2009, Bibi has been prime minister. Now, just to put that into context, I want to tell you what's happened to me since 2009. When Bibi was first elected, well, I should say second time elected in 2009, I was a senior in high school. Since high school, I served in the IDF. I worked at Muss as a madrich. I traveled to India. I traveled to the US. I completed a bachelor's degree. I taught with Muss for 3 years. And now we're starting another term. So that is how long he has been in my life. My adult life has virtually always been in a country where this man was the prime minister. So why would I pick this topic? Because this guy has basically had a very, very, very big influence on my life. And just another thought, seeing as where America is right now in politics, without getting into the details of good, bad, everybody knows that the past few years in American politics have been very, very, very tense, and everybody has very strong feelings. So it's been 3 years. I'm sure for many of you, it feels like much longer, no matter which side of the political map you're on. Imagine what having a controversial figure as prime minister for 11 years is like on the Israeli psyche. Many people love Bibi. Many people hate Bibi. I am here for the next 40 minutes, not to talk about why anybody should love him or hate him. I want to talk about why I find him so fascinating. And again, in 40 minutes, there's very little details that I can go into. So what I want to focus on isn't so much the biography of his life, or what are the good things he's done for Israel, or what are the not good things he's done for Israel. I would like to focus on how he wins. How does he keep pulling it off, and how has he stayed in power for so many years? And in order to do that, I've chosen a number of things. I won't be able to touch on everything, and I'm going to try and finish a few minutes before the end to allow people to ask questions if you have follow-up questions. But I want to focus on a number of things. I've basically thought of two main reasons that he keeps winning. In order to understand them, though, I do need to give you a bit of a background. And in order to do that, I'm going to share my screen, and I am going to put a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to show you guys a couple of videos in a minute as well that I think are important. And I would like to start with this picture, which I hope you guys can see. Netanyahu is the man who is standing right here in the middle. This is a picture he is very proud of. Bibi Netanyahu fought in Israel's most important army unit, okay, Sayeret Matkal, a unit that will become very famous when his brother fights in it as well, and actually dies in an attempt to rescue innocent Jews in an operation called Operation Entebbe. Those who have been in my class have heard me speak about this story before. His brother dying in Entebbe is going to be one of the two, I think, most important events in his life that will affect his narrative of who he is, okay? That's gonna be the first one. The second event that I think is very, very, very important is actually an event that happens earlier in his life. Bibi is going to be born in Jerusalem. He's going to be born in Jerusalem. And what's going to happen is at the age of 14, his family will move to Pennsylvania. The question for many years has been why? Why did his family move? His father was a professor of history who couldn't get the job he wanted at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and actually becomes a professor at Cornell. I don't know if the following thing I'm going to tell you is true or not, but this is the narrative about Bibi's father. He couldn't get the post he wanted in academic life because of his political opinions. Professor Ben-Zion Netanyahu had opinions that were in the right wing of Israeli politics. And the majority of academia back then, and many would say today, was mainly held by members of people who supported the Labor Party, okay, which is our left-wing party in our government, in our political system. And his father basically couldn't get the job and moved the family to the US. Now, whether this is why he didn't get the job or not doesn't matter, because having a brother who died on a rescue mission in the army, and being the son of a father who couldn't get the job he wanted because of his political opinions, will serve as very important tools in Bibi's narrative of his life. And these are very important to understand. In terms of Israeli politics, in terms of how he got here, this is a picture of Benjamin Netanyahu in 1995, okay? When he was 46 years old. He actually came onto the picture about 2 years earlier in 1993. 1993, Benjamin Netanyahu becomes the leader of the Likud party, okay? After a few years representing Israel at the UN in New York, he comes back to Israel, and this is 2 years after he becomes the leader of the Likud party. This is during a very, very, very difficult time in Israel's history. On the one hand, it looked as if Israel was finally about to make peace with the Palestinians in an agreement called the Oslo Accords. However, this was a difficult time because even though at this very moment, Israel and the Palestinian leaders were trying to come up with a peace plan, there were still numerous terrorist attacks on Israeli streets, and it was a very difficult time for Israelis. The picture I'm showing you right now is actually a picture of Netanyahu at the scene of a terrorist attack about 15, 20 minutes after the attack took place. He arrived at the scene and spoke about how Israel's peace process is endangering the people. Now, whether this is the appropriate time to talk about that or not doesn't matter. What matters is that during this year, whenever the terror settled and there were less terror attacks, you could see Israel's prime minister at the time, Yitzhak Rabin, ahead in the polls of what should have been the 1996 elections a year later. Whenever there was a terrorist attack, people looked at this man and pictured this scene, and Bibi was rising in the polls. Meaning, from a very early point, he put himself in the position of the man who is going to take care of Israel's security. Anytime there's a terrorist attack, he would speak up. That was going to be his ticket. But that wasn't the only ticket he was going to have. Another thing that he did then, and he still does to this day, and I've collected a number of pictures from different time periods, was Benjamin Netanyahu was going to go out and meet the simple people and try to play a card that, again, some people would say wasn't real. Some people would say was. It doesn't matter because this is the card he used. He was going to try and connect with the simple people and talk about how much they had in common. These are all pictures from the Shuk in Tel Aviv. Already starting in the mid-90s, Benjamin Netanyahu went out to the people in the markets, on the streets, and would preach about how the elitists wouldn't care about them, didn't represent them, just like they didn't represent him, which is very interesting because he came from a pretty, I wouldn't say wealthy, but a standard Israeli family, an Ashkenazi Jew. He lived in America for many years. He probably could have been a very successful businessman had he not gone into politics. But he constantly brought up this idea about his father and how his father was shunned for his political opinions. And his goal was to gain popularity on the street as the guy who was just like them. He too had right-wing opinions which were not popular in Israeli media. He too wasn't treated fairly. His father didn't get the job that he wanted. And this is going to be something that he was going to use from a very early point. Already here, the quotes coming from him so interestingly shape what is going to happen many years later. He's going to make a connection between the word left and the word media, and he's going to constantly reinforce that when meeting different peoples and when speaking and interviewing. The media are mainly made up of people who are of left-wing opinions, and they do not represent you, and they've never given you a real chance. Now, I'm going to talk about the media in a second, and we're going to ask the question, which I don't have the answer to. Did he have a grain of truth in what he was saying? Maybe he did. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. We'll talk about that in a minute. But this is what is going through people's minds in the mid-90s. What's going to happen is, in 1996, the elections are going to take place. The elections did not take place between Bibi Netanyahu and Yitzhak Rabin, because Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated not long after these terrorist attacks took place by a Jew, by Yigal Amir. And in 1996, the elections are going to take place between Benjamin Netanyahu and Rabin's successor, Shimon Peres. Shimon Peres was the heavy favorite at the time. And it was during these times when I was 6 years old when I looked up at the posters of Netanyahu. And I asked if he had a chance. I was told he didn't. But in 1996, he wins. He becomes the youngest prime minister ever in Israel's history. But unfortunately for him, 2.5 years after he wins the elections, he loses in the following elections. He made 2 very big mistakes. Now, when I say mistakes, again, I'm not here to talk about whether he did a good job or a bad one. I want to talk about mistakes from his point of view. The first mistake he makes is the one you see in front of you. Shaking Yasser Arafat's hand. Yasser Arafat was the leader of the PLO. He was the very man who Yitzhak Rabin had created this peace process with. The very peace process that Bibi was using to gain political popularity and win the elections. Once he won the elections, something interesting happens. He actually continues Rabin's peace process. He signs an agreement called the Hebron Agreement, where he basically hands over 80% of one of Israel's 4 holy cities to Palestinian control. This was a very big problem for his base, for his supporters. Now, who is Bibi? Was he the man who was against the peace process in the year prior and he changed his mind? Did he do this for a different reason? We'll never really know. But this, for all intents and purposes, was a very big mistake for him because his base stopped believing in him. This is going to be one of the key reasons why he's going to lose the elections in 1999. What's going to happen is, in 2002, once we have another elections, he isn't even the most popular man in his own party, in the Likud party. The man who takes over the Likud party is going to be a man named Ariel Sharon, and he's going to give Bibi the job as finance minister in 2002. As finance minister in 2002, Bibi will do a really interesting thing. And I'll share with you, I'll tell you in a second why I'm sharing this picture with you. As finance minister, Bibi has a lot on his hands. There is a giant deficit that our country is in financially, and Bibi is actually able to close it pretty well. But closing this deficit had to come at a certain cost. And one of those costs was a number of different social welfare payments that Israel was giving out. Many people who were on the receiving end of this social welfare were the ultra-Orthodox. And in an interview that he would soon regret, Benjamin Netanyahu let slip the following sentence. If people want to be able to afford a normal life, they should not have 12 to 14 kids. And that got him in a lot of trouble with the Haredim, with the ultra-Orthodox. The Hebron Agreement that I mentioned, the picture with Yasser Arafat, and Hebron Agreement, and the sentence he says about the ultra-Orthodox will cost him dearly. He was not viewed by many at his base, the people who supported him, as a good financial minister, even though you could say on a national level, he was able to cut Israel's deficit. But he's going to learn from his mistakes. As you can see, he is sitting, in the picture I'm showing you right now, it's a picture from pretty recently, he's sitting in between 2 very prominent members of the ultra-Orthodox parties. He will not cross them again. And I'm going to explain what I mean. The picture you see here is the result of the 2009 elections. And I want to stop here for a second, and I want to stop sharing, and I want to go back so I can see everybody here. And I want to make something clear before I get into this. As the 2009 elections come closer and closer and closer, Bibi understands 2 very important things. Do not ever be caught as a leftist again, as a leftist, right? Don't ever be caught as the person who's willing to hand over land to the Palestinians. And don't ever, ever mess with the people who are always going to vote for you. Now in Israel, our electoral system is very different than the US. When I say don't mess with the people who are going to vote for you, I'm not necessarily talking about the people who are going to vote for Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party. The way our system works is we do not vote for candidates, we vote for parties. And what happens is after all the votes are tallied, okay, each party receives the number of members to represent that party in our parliament, in our Knesset, based on how many votes that party received. There are 120 members of Knesset, and so the more votes your party gets, the most member of Knesset you can have within those 120. And what Benjamin Netanyahu realized was this, and he used this to this day. When I say this day, I literally mean this day. What matters isn't that Likud gets all the votes. What matters is that the right-wing bloc, meaning the group of parties that forms Israel's right wing, gets more votes than the left. And I want to use 2009 as an example. And I'm going to share my screen again with you and show you what I wanted to show you 2 seconds ago. I've got it back up there. Okay, this is, Okay, this is the map of the results of 2009. I remember these elections, I was in 12th grade. Now, if you look at the results, Likud has 27 seats, meaning in terms of how many votes they got the equivalent out of 120 seats altogether, they got 27 seats, meaning almost a quarter of the country voted for them. But if you look slightly to the left, Kadima, who is headed by a lady called Tzipi Livni, received 28 votes, 28 seats, meaning technically, Kadima won the elections. So how did Bibi become prime minister? Because what needs to happen in this, the way the elections work is this. We have a president in our country. He doesn't have any legislative power, okay? It's a different role than it is in the US. But one of the things our president does is he looks at the elections for the Knesset and he chooses the leader of the party that he feels has the best chance of forming a government. What does forming a government mean? It means that the head of the leading party, which you would think would be Kadima with 28, has to turn to all the other smaller parties that you see here and try to get everybody together in intense negotiations to try and form a majority, meaning if Kadima has 28, their goal is going to be to try to get over 60 seats and try to get an agreement, and that way they can form a government. If they are able to get more than 60 seats, meaning more than half of the Knesset on their side, we can have a government. And in those intense negotiations, different jobs are offered to different people. So if Kadima wants labor on their side, they're going to tell labor, we'll give you the role of defense minister and finance minister, and you should join our coalition. So it's basically very intense negotiations that happen for a few weeks. Benjamin Netanyahu realized, whether I get 27 or 30 or 25, I just need to make sure that the parties that would support me over Kadima receive more votes than the 60. And so what happens in 2009 is this. Benjamin Netanyahu forms the government, even though he received less votes than Kadima. If you count the numbers, he gets Shas, United Torah Judaism, Yisrael Beitenu, Jewish Home and National Union. He gets them to join him. If you do the quick count up, okay, that's 42-57, that's 64 seats. So Benjamin Netanyahu is able to make an agreement to make negotiations work with those parties, and those 64 form the majority out of the 120, and Benjamin Netanyahu becomes the prime minister. Now, why did I bring up what I said before about the Hebron Agreement and about what he said about not having a lot of kids if you don't have money? Look at the 15 seats he gets from the ultra-Orthodox. Shas, S-H-A-S with 11 seats, and United Torah Judaism with 4. Those 15 seats he gets are the ultra-Orthodox parties. Those were seats that he could not get if you would have uttered another sentence like that. So the sentence he said about not having too many kids if you don't have enough money, that was said 7 years early, he would never have let himself say that again. And what he realized since then is if I want to be the prime minister, I need to keep those people happy. Now here's where we come back to the question I started with. What is Bibi's real ideology? Does he really believe? Did he really change his mind in terms of his finances? Does he really change his mind in terms of the ultra-Orthodox? Did he really change his mind tactically about the Hebron Agreement? I'm not sure. But he realized that he cannot be caught saying anything bad about the ultra-Orthodox, and he cannot be caught coming off as a leftist, as someone who's willing to give away land to the Palestinians. And that is going to be something that he hasn't stopped, that he hasn't dropped, and he has still been in power since then. Once he wins, once he learns from his mistakes, he's going to try and focus on the thing that is going to really keep him in power. And that is the protector of Israel. From the moment he gets voted, from the moment he wins in 2009, he realizes that the Israelis have a collective memory. Okay. I want to stop sharing for a second because the eye contact for me is important to be able to see people I'm speaking to. So I'm going to close that for a second. His father was a history professor. Every single person who's been in our program understands the idea of a collective memory. The idea that the Jewish people, even though we haven't been a part of every event in our history, all feel as if we had been there. We very recently celebrated a holiday that talks about this. We must see ourselves as if we left Egypt. Think about, we just had an Israel Holocaust Memorial Day a couple days ago. We don't celebrate Holocaust Memorial Day as Jews as if this is just some ancient thing that didn't happen. Even though we weren't there, we commemorate it, I should say, as people who were. We look at our history as if we were there. That is something that has always kept us unique. And Benjamin Netanyahu, with a history professor as a father, understands that more than anything. You could say he's a demagogue, that he uses our collective memory, okay, to scare people. You could say he really believes that we are under imminent threat and is doing the best he can to protect us. I'm not here to say which one he is. Is he trying to scare people to get their votes, or does he really believe that we're in such danger? I don't know. But his ticket from 2009, once he regains that seat, is Iran, Iran, Iran. Iran is going to be our biggest threat, and you need me to protect you from this threat. He realized something as finance minister. Even though he did a good job, Israelis don't go to the poll to vote based on finances. It's different in America, right? In America, a lot of the voting has to do with finances. In Israel, in a country that is surrounded by neighbors who don't like us very much, a country that is made up of children of refugees, and a country that, we're 70, 75 years after the Holocaust, people vote based on security, on feeling secure. And Benjamin Netanyahu realized that. And so what he's going to do from 2009 is anytime something is brought up that doesn't favor him, including the many indictments, the indictments that he's under now for the different cases that he's being charged for, is what matters most is life itself. And I'm here protecting your life. And I want to go back to sharing the screen with you so I can show you the following picture. These are all taken from different speeches Bibi has given over the years in the US Congress and at the UN, talking about the urgency of Iran. When he stands up there in his perfect English and talks about this imminent threat, and you can see in the picture below the books that he's showing, seeing this man speak with such charisma, because he's a great speaker, okay? Seeing him speak with such charisma at a UN stage and pointing at books that were apparently recovered in a secret mission by the Mossad was something that was so exciting for so many Israelis. This was our representative standing in the biggest stage in the world, talking about how Iran lied, how they were hiding things, how they are secretly still building a nuclear weapon to destroy us. This is something that no matter how hard Israelis try, it is very hard to get over our psyche. Even those who opposed him during these speeches, everyone gets this feeling. It's something that's very hard to get out of us. Iran is going to be his big focus, but Iran is the problem. How does he help us solve this problem beyond these speeches? The answer is America. One of the most consistent messages that Bibi gives, that if you really want to stop Iran, I know I stopped sharing on purpose, if you really want to stop Iran, we need America as our ally. America are the only ones who can help us stop Iran. It is not a coincidence that he prides himself on his English, okay? Living in America, it is hard to understand the concept of an Israeli that a different country can decide your fate in a split second. Okay, as Israelis, we are very lucky that we have a good relationship with America. But you cannot ignore the fact that if America wanted to, our lives would be much more difficult. There is a great fear that I feel as an Israeli, Israelis feel about America and how Americans view us. I bring this up a few times. People here, I see former students of mine here. I think we've spoken about this in the course. When we do street interviews in Tel Aviv, one of the questions that I like asking students after they speak with Israelis is, did Israelis seem like they were happy to see you here? How did Israelis see you guys walk? Were they excited to hear you speak English? Were they happy to see Americans in Israel? I think there are usually two answers. Sometimes Israelis can feel a resentment, maybe a little bit of anger. These people sort of control, right? But most of the time, I feel, and I think our students feel, is that Israelis are very, very happy to see you. Israelis are very happy to see Americans. And I think you cannot ignore the fact that this has a lot to do with our security, with our lives. And so this idea of relationship with America is something that Benjamin Netanyahu is very, very proud of. I'm going to show you his Facebook page at the end of this. You're going to see his background picture, and you're going to understand exactly what I'm talking about. But before we do that, I want to share a video with you. Okay? I want to share a video with you. This video, coincidentally, happens 2 weeks before the elections in 2015. Okay? I'm going to show you the video for 15 seconds, and I'm going to explain why this video, I think, affected the 2015 elections, which he's going to win very, very, very greatly. I'm going to show it to you right now. Okay. Hopefully you can hear. If not, you're going to get the idea. Some of you can probably recognize this is the US Congress. I want you to look at the reaction as Benjamin Netanyahu walks into the room. Watch the standing ovation he's getting at the Congress. By the way, this speech, a few members of the American Congress actually didn't show up on purpose. So what we're seeing is mostly people who like him anyway. But this is 2 weeks before elections in 2015. And watch the reaction of the American Congress when this prime minister walks in. Okay. Understand what that looks like to an Israeli 2 weeks before the elections. That speech actually took place against Barack Obama's will. Barack Obama did not know Benjamin Netanyahu was going to give that speech. I do not want to get into, was this a good thing for Israel? Was this a bad thing for Israel? What do we think about Trump? What do we think of? It's not relevant. What's relevant is this. As an Israeli, people are looking at the TV and saying, oh my God, this guy could go behind the back of the President of the United States and give a speech in front of the Congress and receive that kind of standing ovation? Needless to say, as opposed to what all the polls said in 2015, he won in a landslide 2 weeks after that speech took place. It is hard to argue with the success of this tactic that he took. I want to say one last thing with regards to the security, and then I want to talk a little bit about his relationship with the media, and then I'll open it up for questions. I'm telling you that his biggest card is security. I'm keeping you secure. About a year and a half ago, a former general in the Israeli army, Benny Ganz, opened a new party called Blue and White. It's a year and a half ago. Blue and White, within a few months, will negotiate and collaborate and actually join forces with another party. This party has Benny Gantz at the top. He was the former chief of staff of the IDF. Numbers 3 and 4 were also former generals of the Israeli army, former chiefs of staff. This party, this man Benny Gantz builds, is the party for security. Okay, it has all these former chiefs of staff. It had the former head of the Mossad. And you wonder, this is a year and a half ago, how does Bibi convince the Israeli public that if they want security, they should vote for him and not for them? I want to show you another short clip. This clip, I think, is amazing. I remember watching this on the news. This happened about a little bit over a year ago. I remember watching this, seeing what he said. I'm going to show you one sentence that Benjamin Netanyahu said, and thinking in my mind, Benny Gantz has no chance. What did Bibi say in this one sentence that told me that he has that his opponent has no chance? The video I'm going to show you is the video of Benjamin Netanyahu getting on a plane in Brazil after a few meetings, getting ready for his flight back to Israel. And Benjamin Netanyahu is asked, this is the first time he's going to hear this, what do you think about Benny Gantz joining politics? And Bibi's response, in my opinion, will be the thing that has led to what happened yesterday, which was a government under his conditions. I want to show you the video. Again, this is a video of Bibi's response to being asked, what do you think about this new party with all these Israeli generals? Okay, turn the volume. Now I'm saying right now, I'm going to show you the video in Hebrew. For those of you who don't understand, it's literally one sentence. I will translate. Okay. I'm going to tell you what he said, and then we'll try and figure out together. He says, what do you have to say, the reporter, what do you have to say about the fact that Benny Gantz has joined politics? So he looks at the camera, he laughs, and he says, I don't care how the left divide up their votes. Benny Gantz and other members of his party, if you look strictly at what their opinions have been, what they've done in their past, they're not left. They're not left wing. But he was able to brand them that from the moment he heard they entered politics. When he hears that Benny Gantz, this big general, is entering the Israeli political race, he says, I don't care how the left divide up their votes. And from the minute this happens, it doesn't stop. Every single commercial for the Likud party and every single time that there's an interview, Gantz is left. It's great that he's a general, but he's left. For him to form a government, I'm reminding you the chart I showed you before. What Bibi is saying is, it's great that he's a general, but in order for him to be prime minister, he has to make a deal with the Labour Party and Meretz Party and the Arab Party. Those are all left-wing parties. So that's not secure. How would Israelis feel secure? And again, I'm not saying this in a way that is meant to show whether this is good or bad. It was a brilliant, brilliant move. Because what it did was put in Israelis' minds that Benny Gantz equals left. Left equals not being safe. And again, I'm going back to what he realized all those years ago. I don't need to get the most votes in the elections. I need the right-wing bloc to support me because it's always going to be bigger. Because most people in Israel, numbers-wise, vote to the right. And what do you know? 2 days ago, Benny Gantz basically gave up his party, and he's joining Bibi's government, and Bibi's going to be prime minister for the first year and a half at least, and after that we'll have to see. And it worked, and I'm showing you a video that I remember seeing from a year and a half ago, and I knew that was going to make life very, very, very difficult for Gantz. One last piece about that. I can send this out to anyone who's interested. I'm not going to show it right now because it's too long. There's a great commercial for these past elections for the Likud party. And as part of the commercial, Bibi Netanyahu appears as the lifeguard at the beach. Why? Because he's protecting us from the very troubled waters of the Middle East. It's a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant commercial. I'm happy to send it out to anyone. I can give it to Greg and he can pass it on. It was a brilliant commercial, and that ultimately is what he's tried to do. So that was really the first and main thing I wanted to talk about. So if I were to sort of summarize what I said until now, I would say this. He realized pretty quickly that if I can say I equals security, security equals right, if I do that thing, I will always win. And honestly, since he started doing that, he hasn't lost. The second thing I want to talk about, and this will be shorter, okay, is, because I think this is another key part, right? One part was the security. I think the second part is the key part, is his relationship with the Israeli media, okay? His relationship with the Israeli media, I feel, is another very important key into understanding who he is and how he keeps winning. And in order to do that, I want to go back to a debate he took part of in 1996. In 1996, as I said, he is the heavy underdog. And he begs Shimon Peres, the guy who was favored to win the elections, he begs him to meet him on screen for a debate. He begs him. And Shimon Peres, who had already served as prime minister 20 years before then, was very experienced. Was there going to be the replacement for Yitzhak Rabin, who was just assassinated? So this is playing also on an emotional level for Israelis. Felt like, I'll show up, I'll kick this 43-year-old's butt, and it won't be a problem. It'll be easy for me. Shimon Peres shows up to the debate with Benjamin Netanyahu. 30 minutes later, when the debate ends, Bibi changes everything. Those 30 minutes will win him the elections, because Bibi does two things. This is 1996. He does two things. He realizes that his voters want to feel like he sees them. So every time the reporter asks a question, Shimon Peres looks at the reporter and answers, while Bibi turns around, looks at the screen, and talks to the people. And the second thing he does is he comes prepared, very prepared, something that Shimon Peres didn't, because he didn't think he needed to. Benjamin Netanyahu is going to win the elections in that debate. I want to show you a picture of a screenshot I took from that debate, because I didn't want to show you everything, just to take a look at the way he sees things. 1 second. Okay. This is from that debate. You can see his face. He turns to the camera, okay, and he looks at it and he speaks with concern to the people. You can see the number 2, which is right above his head. Very important, very interesting. I'm going to talk about why that number 2 is important in a bit. I can tell you right now, number 2 is our most important news channel, which actually was created the year he won the Likud primaries. Just for reference, to understand how long Bibi has been a part of Israeli politics, Channel 2 has had 9,400 segments in its history. Out of 9,400 segments, 7,000 have been about Bibi. Okay, that means in almost 30 years, he's controlled almost more than 70% of the news segments since 1993. Okay? What's very interesting is this. Benjamin Netanyahu wins this debate. He actually wins it pretty easily, as I said. How many debates has he taken part of since then? His goal? He's had to get involved with certain interviews, but basically, he has not agreed to be in a debate since. I can't remember in the late 90s if he took part or not, but in recent years, Benjamin Netanyahu refuses to take part in debates. Why? He has realized, based on the result of that debate in 1996, that the person who's favored can only lose from these debates. Because once you put two people sitting next to each other, you can imagine that they're equals, that one could be the other, that this is a fair game, that they're both good. He realized, I cannot sit in a debate. Not only did he realize that he can't sit in a debate, he also realized that there's no reason for him to give interviews. Why would he want to give interviews? Interviews can only take away from what he is. People already know who he is. Let other people do interviews. Let other people mess up. I want to show you something just to kind of show you that point. Okay, in terms of world leaders and interviews, I'm sure this is a picture here of a bunch of the world leaders. Okay, to the left you can see Obama. Underneath you can see Merkel from Germany, and you can see Putin up to the right. These are world leaders, and these are pictures of interviews since 2013. Okay. Interviews as in on TV, reporter versus reporter in front of candidates. How many have there been? So since 2013, again, this is just for context, just to understand, Barack Obama has given, since 2013, again, this is till 2016, right? Obama gave 95 interviews. Angela Merkel gave 52. Putin gave 8. And Bibi hasn't given a single one since 2013. Not a single interview. The picture I gave is a picture of him talking to the TV. This is not an interview. Okay, this is not an interview. So he did not follow he does not interview. And I want to show you, I'm going to show you one more thing. I want to show you a short clip that I think is also just fantastic of the one time he did agree to a debate. And this is what he agrees to. This is 3 days before the elections in 2015, the elections that I told you he's going to win in a landslide. 3 days before the elections, he agrees to come on a panel to appear on the news, but he doesn't agree to come into the studio. What he agrees to is the following thing that I'm going to show you. He agrees, take a good look at this, to appear on screen behind the other candidate, but he has to be bigger than him. So what does the Israeli public see 3 days before the elections? Little Benjamin Herzog sitting at the table, and behind him, with his big, booming, charismatic voice on a bigger screen, Benjamin Netanyahu. And as if this isn't bad enough, as if Herzog, the other candidate, didn't put enough, didn't trample over his own feet by accident, he has a horrible, I guess he called it a Freudian slip in that interview. As Herzog and Bibi are both being asked their opinions on keeping Jerusalem united, Herzog bangs his fist on the table and says, "We are going to keep Netanyahu united." And he doesn't realize that he said Netanyahu, not Jerusalem. And behind him, you see the big picture of Bibi, who looks at him, laughs, and says, "Thank you very much." I'm going to show you the short video of him doing that. This, again, if there was any questions as to who was going to win the elections, we all should have known at that moment. I want to show you the video clip of this playing. Again, it's in Hebrew, so maybe some of you won't understand the words, but it's enough to understand the point. Okay, you're going to see Benjamin Netanyahu's reaction, the way he laughs. Okay, here we go.
אני אשמור על נתניהו מאוחדת ולוכדת בריבונות ישראל, ואני שואל את ראש הממשלה נתניהו, האם אתה מוכן לקבל את העיקרון?
And Israelis, as I said, could not get this image out of their mind of big Bibi sitting behind him, laughing at his face. It killed it. And so the one time he actually shows up for debate, it's basically over, okay? And he wins that one. One last thing I want to say is this. There's a lot of talk in current American politics about media and whose side is the media on. Bibi was sort of on this spot very early. Already in the 90s, he's going to say, media equals left. And I said at the beginning of this class that I was going to go back to this. Benjamin Netanyahu was right. Most of the media members in the mid-90s, if not all of them, were on the left side of the political map. He was right to say that. But his outcry and his anger, and I would say him putting himself as a victim, is up for debate. Some people feel like he was right to feel so because every time he went to an interview, he'd be attacked. By the way, this is sort of, you could say this is true. The people who were interviewing him in the mid-90s were definitely not on his side of the political map. Other people would say this was all planned. He knew that this was the way to get to his voters. What is the right answer? I don't know. But the way he views the media has been pretty consistent since the mid-90s. And one interesting thing he does is this. In 2007, this is right before his comeback in 2009, his close friend, Sheldon Adelson, who some of you might know, okay? His close friend, Sheldon Adelson, creates a newspaper called Israel Hayom, Israel Today, okay? Israel Today was meant to sound sort of like USA Today. And Sheldon Adelson and Benjamin Netanyahu were very close. And this newspaper was in terms of how it was written and the reporters in it, were much more on Bibi's side. In Israel, this newspaper is called the Bibi newspaper. From 2007, this newspaper came out, and it's very pro-Bibi. Now, again, many people would say, well, finally, we have someone who represents his side, okay? The key point in understanding this newspaper is understanding that this newspaper is distributed free. It doesn't cost money. And many times in the Knesset, there have been different parties who've tried to legislate against this, saying, you can't give out this free newspaper, that's not fair. And in 2014, Benjamin Netanyahu is actually going to dissolve the government and go to early elections because he doesn't want this law to stop his newspaper. And those are going to be the elections in 2015 that he wins right after the videos I just showed you. When he was in MIT, he went to MIT right after his army service. He actually wrote a paper called "How Will the Internet Affect Media?" And that, I think, is the true and final thing that we can understand about him. He understood more than anyone else. Media was heading a certain way. And so what became very popular for Bibi was social media. So the last picture I'm going to show you is what I promised you, Bibi's Facebook page. If you look at Bibi's Facebook page, look at the background picture, okay? You can go and see for yourself. It is Bibi next to Trump, meaning me and America go hand in hand. If you want to feel secure, if you want to feel like America's on your side, you should vote for me. So again, newspaper, media, maybe he all saw this coming when he wrote a paper at MIT, but he knew that Facebook or social media was going to be the next step in relationships between politics and media. I'm going to finish now with a few minutes left. I'm going to stay here for a couple more minutes if people have questions, but if I just want to wrap up again, I think those two things are really important to understanding him and who he is. On the one hand, Mr. Security. On the other hand, the connection with the media, how he understands it and how he uses it. Again, he won a debate on TV. He basically, you could say, almost owns a newspaper. He has a great Facebook page. He realized that media is multimedia. There are a lot of different things. So that's the last thing I wanted to say. Thanks everybody for joining. I'm going to stay on for a few questions if people have. You can either write it on the chat or you can unmute yourself, or I guess Greg can unmute you if anybody
Jacob, thank you. That was great. So we have time probably for one question because we have to end right at 2 o'clock today. Okay. So any questions for Jacob? Or perhaps if you have questions afterwards, you can email Jacob. You want to send them your email address?
Sure. I'm going to send an email just to chat. Any questions, always, not just now. People can feel free to write. I'm going to write it right now in the chat, and then people can sign off. Thanks, guys, for being here and listening. Hope you found it interesting and relevant to today.
How can some of these strategies be challenged is the question from Julie.
How can some of the strategies be challenged? I think it's a really good question. I think that I think it sort of depends on who the candidate is. If you want to talk, if I want to give a short answer, I can give you Benny Gantz as an example. I think, again, if my goal is Benny Gantz is to be prime minister, he should have from the first moment. Okay, again, this is if Benny Gantz wanted to win the elections. If he wanted to show what his ideology was, then he maybe shouldn't have done this. But Benny Gantz kept talking about how he was not right or left, he was middle, which allowed this whole thing to be said, you're left. I think since most of the people in his party are actually more to the right, he should have just said, we are a right-wing party. That's, I think, what maybe could have won the election if he actually would have said that. Maybe I'm wrong. But in terms of the big picture and the strategies, I don't know the answer. And I think if anybody knew the answer, then maybe things would have been different. But it'll be very interesting going forward, seeing what happens in the next couple of years. By the way, 3 out of the 5 cases that he's being indicted for, okay, have to do with media. So again, this goes back to what we're talking about, okay? So that just goes back to everything we were saying. So
do you think Bibi will keep his promise to let Gantz become prime minister?
What do I think, or what should I say in order to be fair? What do I think? What do I think? I think the chances are close to 0, but maybe I'll be wrong. Again, and I say that not with, oh, he's a liar, oh, I don't think he's going to keep his promise. Politically, I don't see why that would make sense for him if I'm trying to understand his reasoning, but maybe I'll be surprised. I don't think he'll keep it. I think we'll have another elections in about 1.5 years, but polls don't mean anything, as we all know.
Jacob, I want to say, first of all, thank you, because I think you presented a topic today that is political in an apolitical way. I think you've given us a view into what I really appreciate is the personal story too, how Bibi Netanyahu has been a part of your entire adult life. And, you know, being an American citizen where we change presidents every 4 years or every 8 years, you know, I've seen multiple presidents over my adult life. So it's hard to imagine, you know, such a booming political figure over your entire adult life. And I think you presented him in a way that was very apolitical and just gave us a bite into his thinking, into his strategies, into his tactics, and I really appreciate it. The only thing you forgot to mention is where he lived while he was here in the United States, which would be Cheltenham, Pennsylvania, which is not too far from where we are and from Philadelphia. But I don't bring that up just because it's outside of Philadelphia. I bring it up because we have sent many students from MHSI over the years from the Cheltenham area and from the Philadelphia area. So there's always a connection in that way, and there's a memorial to his brother here in the area because they both spend time at Cheltenham High School. So Jacob, thank you for, I think, a very concise presentation and the opportunity to learn and share with you. And want to thank you, and I'll give you the final word today on the class. So thank you. The floor is yours.
All right, thanks guys very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.